This is a special episode of Breaking Down Security. I'm Brian Brake. Hello, dear listener. Welcome back. This is the second podcast where Mr. Betcher is on vacation. I don't know how people take vacation, but he does. He actually messaged me yesterday and said that he was in Devil's Tower. Apparently, he's been listening to some music. Do 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 do. Yeah, exactly.
Was he making special formations with his mashed potatoes?
He was. That's the voice of Mick Douglas, who we're having back as a guest host this week. We're going to be discussing some topics near and dear to him, and we have Mr. Jarrod Frates. I said it right.
You did say it right.
Hell yeah. It's about time. Usually Mr. Betcher tells me, you didn't say that right. So Mr.
It only took you 9 times.
You don't know how many times I yell that in my car. Ask Megan about her husband, Martin. Same thing. I might have called him Simon, I think. I don't know. Anyway, Mick Douglas from Binary Security. That's the blue team side of Darth Kennedy's trusted sec organization type place, right?
Yeah, Binary Defense.
Binary Defense, right. BDS. Not Breaking Down Security, the other BDS.
Yep.
And Mr. Jarrod works for a little company called InGuardians, kind of a little joint. Might know him. Larry Pesce and others, very important people work there as well. Maybe you both could tell us a little bit about yourselves, since we've got a bunch of new first-time listeners. Tell us what you do there in generic terms that won't get you canned. Go ahead, Mick.
Okay, well, I'm the DFIR practice lead at Binary Defense, and so what I do is I help clients get through the darkest days when the attackers are on the wire. I help them understand that not all hope is lost, and I help them deal with the ensuing fecal storms that occur when the bad guys do their stuff.
Okay, right on. And Mr. Jarrod, a quick intro for you too, please.
I'm a senior security analyst at InGuardians. Do pen testing, architecture analysis, policy reviews, all kinds of things like that. Theoretically, also incident handling, but haven't been there quite long enough to get tasked to part of those.
Okay, that's cool. But eventually you'll be doing some IR and some DF stuff as well.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, okay. So if you haven't guessed, the first part of this podcast is going to be about digital forensics and incident response. We're going to talk a little bit about some roles and responsibilities. And the second part is probably what the majority of people are, I hate to say the majority of people that came to listen to, but we have a little contest that we're going to do a giveaway for.
Is this the DerbyCon ticket giveaway episode?
Shh. No, damn it. Oh, man. Damn it. Great. Thanks, Mick. Why did we have you on? Oh, right. DFIR. Right. So that will be a little later. We're going to talk about that a little later. But first, we, what we do here at Breaking Down Security is we like to educate people. We're not a news of the week podcast, not all the time. We do have one news article in case we do happen to go short, but we're not going to talk about it. We're here to talk about digital forensics and incident response. So I'm going to ask a question. So you mentioned in your intro, Mick, that you're here for the dark days. Would it be safe to say that there are stages of grief in the DFIR realm, and it follows a lot of the stage of grief, like shock, awe, denial, acceptance? Do you see that in a company response when that occurs?
Actually, it's funny. I had never thought of it that way, but in almost all of the ones that I've done so far, I have seen that, where there's disbelief, like, why were we the target? How did they get in? I can't believe that we're under attack. The level of naivete that some of the folks have is almost heartwarming, that they still think the internet's full of just nothing but cuddly cat pictures and, trolls, just aren't on their radar. And then, we have to help them understand what's going on, help them deal with the anger that almost always ensues. Sometimes some of the anger comes directly from the board of directors, and that's never a fun day when you're having C-level executives flinging reports and upending chairs, but that happens. And, you just got to help them understand what they got to, what they were able to see potentially, and just tell the story as best you can.
Sure. Now, Jarrod, you and I have worked for a rather large company, and that's how I met you. You were our pen tester. You must have worked some incident response at that big company. How did you ever have to deal with any roles or responsibilities? Was there any kind of specific guidelines that we had to follow when we were doing incident response there at the company?
There's an editable moment.
That's edited. Okay. Oh, God.
So actually, as a pen tester there, I didn't really do much in the way of incident response. I would sort of provide some guidance saying, hey, look, this is the kind of thing that the attackers are going to do. And if I can get in this way in a week, somebody else who comes along and doesn't have a time limit on things is potentially going to be able to do at least this and quite likely much more. Before that, however, I was on the defensive side for 9 years, and I had to do incident handling, and that one was complex. It wasn't, going up with some major mega organization, but it was still 18,000 users, but it was complex because it was a county government. We had 29 agencies. So effectively, I was working with 29 different companies at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so having to explain that, somebody got in, fortunately, we didn't have anything that was really on the catastrophic side while I was there. But we had enough breaks that I had to go and explain, here's what's going on. And I often got the question, well, why us? And the reality is, why not us? Sometimes you just win the lottery. The jackpot turns out to be not something you can retire on.
Oh, flaming pile of dog poo right there,
Yeah, exactly. So but there is a lot of the YS, and the other thing that I always had, that was always a very delicate thing, was, all right, who do we blame for this? It's like, let's get this fixed first and then figure out whether there's any blame to go around. And I think that was the trickier thing to do.
Yeah, I find that a lot. And one thing I would like to say, the opinions, thoughts, and ideas expressed by any of us today, Mick, myself, and Jarrod, are not necessarily the opinions of our employers past, present, and future. I got that little blurb from Defensive Security because some of the things I say are probably not popular in my organization. But so you mentioned blame there. Is that something that are people wanting to find out who did it because it makes them feel better? Or you think it's just a way to deflect away from the problem at hand? I'll put that question out to the both of you.
Honestly, I think it's the most immediate means that a lot of people have to lash out, because they're in a position where they feel they feel frankly violated, and they're, even though it's a technological thing, it's computers, we know it happens all over the place. It's happened to me, and I'm angry about it, and this anger needs to go somewhere, and they want to find out who did it, but they know that they're probably not going to be able to go after the hacker, so they want to go after whoever let the hacker in. And the problem is as any good incident response person will tell you, is you don't start looking to lay down the blame at the beginning, because it might be that maybe there is somebody who's at fault, but that might also be somebody who's really going to be key in getting things back up and running. And if you start laying the blame on them in the middle of things, they might not be so keen on working with you anymore. They might just go, you know what? Bye. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then you've really got a problem.
Sure.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think that it's a very cultural thing, because fortunately or unfortunately, I've been able to work with um, multinational companies, and I think that the blame thing is largely an American company issue. We're a very litigious society. We sue anybody at the drop of a hat. And so people are just comfortable and familiar with, well, who's at blame, who's at fault. And one of the best bits of advice I got from someone early on in my career is you don't ever blame a person until you absolutely positively have to. Instead, you try to focus on the technologies, the procedures, or the protocols that set them up for failure, because they might have just been the fall guy or gal,
Mm-hmm.
and instead they had a completely unsafe environment, and it was just by dumb luck that they got the bad lottery draw.
Sure. Sure. So, okay. So I know for Mick, for the most part, they bring you in after to assist when their IR efforts fail. Am I correct in that?
Well, no, not always. I mean, sometimes it's there to just augment staff. I mean, one of the things that a lot of organizations fail to take into account is that when an incident response event, when you pull that oh crap lever and start doing an investigation, what happens to your day-to-day project work? Almost
Yeah.
very, very few organizations have enough staffing to conduct a thorough and complete investigation. And it's mind-boggling how long some of these investigations can go. And if you go, like, if I went to most medium-sized organizations and said, "Hi, I need your two top best Windows network and database admins. All I need two from each of those groups, and I'm going to need them for the next 2 months due to the size of this breach." They're going to just look at me like I'm, you know, got a third head growing off each shoulder, and that I'm purple and I've got pink mohawks. You
Yeah.
know, that's just crazy talk. And so sometimes we're brought in to do staff augmentation. Other times it's we'll assist and just make sure that they've done a thorough enough job, you know, that they didn't miss anything. And then, unfortunately, sometimes we're brought in because the security team is the group that's the issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I wanted to discuss some of the roles when you have an incident response. You know, I think of it as more like you've got the incident commander, uh, uh, where who would take control of the entire operation. I would assume that would be some kind of manager. Is there you know, and I'm thinking of other roles, but maybe I'm you know, I don't do a lot of incident response myself. So between the two of you, is there any specific requirement for a specific role when this happens? Should there be a guy who manages the entire incident and then like a communications person? Is there, you know, are there established roles in an incident response plan that need to be filled?
That's an awesome question. And that's something that you need to be thinking about prior to an incident happening, because the last thing that you want at an organizational level is everybody looking around saying, who's going to pick the ball up and run? So you're right. You do need to have someone who's the incident commander or the event coordinator. And then you're also, under ideal situations, going to have somebody who's your tech lead, so that you have someone who's actually doing the technical evidence acquisition and analysis, and that you also have someone who's an interface to legal, HR, management groups, so that things are able to still move and progress. Because the last thing you want is, you know, your tech team to be bothered by the lawyers every 15 minutes or so saying, do we have enough evidence yet? So it's always a good idea to try to figure out who's going to do what prior to your event.
Okay. Jarrod, did you find that having to deal with 29, you said 29 different organizations, did you find that there was a specific need for somebody to manage the communications so that the incident commander or event coordinator would not have to deal with that?
We very much didn't, and it unfortunately took us a very long time to deal with that. to really understand that we needed to have a better structure in place. And what we eventually did, we didn't come up with something as neatly formal as what Mick's talking about. And but he's absolutely right. You do need to start worrying about this and discussing it before you actually have an incident. We came up with our mechanism after a couple of incidents that got particularly bad. They were not actually intrusions. They were problems we were having with a particular piece of equipment, and it got to be where managers calling whoever was working on things were actually delaying our ability to get things back up and running. So we came up with a concept where one person would be basically running the investigation, the recovery effort, however you want to look at it. That person basically talked to exactly two other people. The first person that the person would talk to, we designated the shadow. And the shadow's role was to be there to look up information, to retrieve logs, to run sort of maybe some secondary items like, hey, I'm working on this. I need you to go look at these other things because I think I'm on the right track, but there might be these other things that are going to factor into it. So go have a look at that. Mm-hmm. The other person that the lead would talk to was our communications person. And the comms person could be anybody. It was usually one particular person on our team, but it could basically be anybody. All communications, phone, email, physical notes, whatever, went through that person.
Yeah.
Also, we had one of the very few very hard rules that we had in place was nobody went to the desk of the lead except for the shadow and the communications person. Even our manager didn't. And one of the roles of the communications person was to, if necessary, physically intercept anybody who was trying to go to the desk of the lead and, find out what was going on. And we were able to start resolving things. We weren't cutting things down by half the time, but we were able to get to things more quickly, more efficiently, and come up with better answers than we were before. It took us some time to get everybody to understand what we were doing and why, and some of the managers never really did fully accept it. But it still ended up working out a lot better for us. There are some other things that I think we could have done to improve it, including changing how we did updates for both for the managers and for people who were sort of outside the loop but still affected. But at the core of things, we were able to turn things around a lot faster, and we ended up with much, much less frustration on the part of those who were actually working the recovery.
That's actually an awesome idea. And one thing that, for those of you who are listening that aren't going to be in a situation to set up a shadow like that, is one thing that you can do is tell people that if you notify them about what's going on in the investigations, that they may be called to testify when this case goes to court. That tends to shut them up very quickly.
Okay. Very nice. So, for communication is important. We mentioned having the incident commander who would come up with, basically would be the hub of communication. When we're talking incident response, we are talking like, big, in the news, in the company thing. Incident response can be at different levels. Do you ever see companies that are established with their incident response having various levels, and then they don't call out the entire organization for an incident response? It could be something as simple as information leakage. I saw it quite a bit with emails. Do you ever have where do you think that a company should have various phases or different levels of incident response instead of just, going to the nuclear response immediately for an email that leaked company secrets?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can. One of the nice things about having multiple levels is you can also get some practice in it. Go with something that most people would never really consider to be a security incident, at least at the outset. User comes in, let's say a manager. Manager comes in, they've been on vacation for 2 weeks, they go to log in, their very first attempt at logging in, they get a notification that their account is locked out. So there are a number of explanations there. There could be, it could be an attack. Somebody was trying to brute force their password. It could be that somehow there was some utility that was misconfigured that ultimately locked out their password. There could be an HR reason, but you don't want to go launching into a full investigation. That's usually worthy of having a look and see what happens. But in the case where you find out that maybe there's been 100,000 attempts to log into that account, at that point maybe you do need to escalate things. At the same time, if your server starts, if you have half of your servers suddenly start spewing spam, you probably need to jump on things a lot more quickly.
Also, you got to remember that not all every incident is huge. It's my experience that we'll have 5, 10, maybe even 20 real small events for every big one where you have to stop the presses and do a full court press. More often than not, what we find is you'll be doing incident response on just an individual computer where somebody was looking at nudie pictures at work. And so you have to do an investigation, make sure HR and legal is involved, and that you go through your proper procedures and protocols, because you can't be having a hostile work environment. So you're more often than not, most incidents are of the very small variety.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you rarely want you'd have to call somebody in to augment. I mean, so you should be. You mentioned, Jarrod, that having an IR, small IR event is a way to help exercise your incident response team or your incident response plans, or kind of business continuity plans kind of going hand in hand with that too. You want to fake an incident so that you can enact your business continuity plan, or to test your backups or your beta site if you use a traditional data center, or to fail over to US East if you're using Amazon or different Google cloud. I don't know how that works for Google, but so when I'm a blue teamer and I call InGuardians, or I call binary defense there, and when they come in, how should I be used? If you guys are, I assume you guys would take the role of the incident commander or the event commander, or are you just there to take orders from the event commander who's there? I mean, or the event coordinator. How do you guys find yourselves in both sides of the role, or running the whole deal yourselves?
It largely depends on the client. So if we have a pre-existing, if they're on retainer with us, we're going to largely know what's expected of us. Most of those people who have us on retainer, they are, for whatever reasons, they have opted to outsource that capability. So they look to us as a one-stop shop for everything. We come on site, we take over everything. There's other places where maybe we're doing basically like a staff augmentation or a capabilities uplift, if you will. And what we'll do in those situations is until we see that they're struggling with an area, we will let them run the show, and we'll just be technical prowess. And then you can get into a little bit of the social engineering side needed if you have to tell somebody, hey, this phase isn't going as smooth as it could. Maybe we could help you, give you some techniques, or if you'd like, we could maybe run this next status meeting for you. And in a lot of cases, they're very receptive to that, because they're just as sleep deprived as anyone else. And the fact that somebody has, been there, done that, can be very comforting for them.
Something else to keep in mind is that getting an outside perspective on any portion of things can be a very powerful thing. Brian, I'm sure you're very well aware of the power of getting the opinion of somebody that's been paid for, and where you can say you could basically be yelling from the top of the mountain certain things, but until somebody comes along and writes a large check to somebody else, management's not necessarily going to believe it. And sometimes that's the case in incident response, that they don't want to hear from inside that this is, that either that this is not our fault or that this is our fault. And they bring in somebody from the outside who is largely viewed as being relatively neutral, who can say, yes, we were able to trace this and your team was right. Either this was not our fault, this was way beyond our capabilities to detect, or this was something that we should have caught, and these are the steps that should have been taken somewhere along the way. It's money talks, unfortunately.
Sure, no, I totally understand that. From the place that you and I both worked at, we definitely did use the pen tester or the people as a force for change, and that's kind of universal all around. So, why? Here's another question I've got. We mentioned incident response. Thank you, Jarrod. He's commenting about the fact that there was some noise earlier, so I'm hoping that comes out in the wash. So. We mentioned incident response, and I know we had Mick on earlier about a month ago, I think, or better, to talk about. He teaches a SANS course for DFIR, which is Digital Forensics and Incident Response. Why does the digital forensics always seem to be part and parcel, hand in hand with incident response? Because it seems like one is necessary for the other. So you need sometimes digital forensics for incident response, but you don't always need, digital forensics, do you, for when you're doing an incident response?
Oh man, you just have to stir the hornet's nest, don't you? So here's my take on it, and this is just one man's opinion. Let the flame wars begin in earnest, Twitter, when this podcast comes on out. My take on it is that digital forensics and incident response are two sides of the same coin, and they're on a continuum. If you're dealing with something that is a fairly lightweight event that is never going to go to court, you probably don't have to do a full memory analysis workup. You don't have to do a complete forensics capture of all 25 workstations that were involved in who was going to maybe the betting site. You need to figure out what the appropriate response is and how deep you want it to go. But I think that what's interesting is both of those disciplines, digital forensics and incident response, draw on the exact same technologies. The only difference is how they're applied. When it's digital forensics, you got all the time in the world. Study it, understand it, take your time. Incident response is about returning operations to normal as fast as possible. You're still going to use largely the same tool set, but it's how you use it that's different. And the analogy I like to tell folks is it's the difference between a violin and a fiddle. It's the same instrument, it's tuned the same way, it's just the technique that you play it with.
Very nice. Okay. So, do you have any favorite tools you're using if you have to do digital forensics? I mean, obviously you must have to scrape RAM memory and dump that to files. I mean, are you using like command line stuff like DD, or are there specialized softwares that you got to pay for? I mean, in your toolbox right now, if you had to go and do some digital forensics, what do you use?
So my first go-to tool is actually a live load distro it's a VM distro called Sift, and it's made by SANS.
Yep.
And just like pen testers love them some Kali Linux, most digital forensics folks really do like Sift. It's got all the memory acquisition tools you need. It's got the network analysis tools. It's got the disk capture and analysis tools. It's all there, and you don't have to pay for it. Now that said, there are a lot of corporations who have money to burn will buy things like Encase and some specialized hardware, things like write blockers. If you have the money and your folks are willing to spend it on your behalf for that, don't turn them away. Those things can, if used appropriately, make life a little easier for you.
Okay. So Jarrod, same question. Do you, I know you said you don't do a lot of incident response yet, but have you had a lot of experience doing any kind of digital forensics on engagements or anything like that? Do you have any Bob stories you might be able to tell about that?
We've used some forensic tools. Actually, once we get in, things like I can't think of it now. FTK Imager, Lite, the free version, to do things like pull files that are in use directly from the NTFS architecture. You have to have admin rights in order to do that, but so you have to get a pretty significant intrusion there. But back when I was doing the incident response on a regular basis, I used the SIF workstation back then, and was sort of experimenting with some things, but it was still kind of early at that point. A lot of the incident response was still focused largely on log analysis, on traffic analysis, things like that. Things like memory analysis was still sort of regarded as something that if you got far enough and you brought in a forensics person, then you would start doing that. But and so I didn't have a whole lot of hands-on training on that kind of thing. A little bit of volatility very early on before I got into pen testing, but I kind of got out from incident response just before the integration of forensics hit.
So before it got hot and everybody wanted to learn it because it's the new hotness.
Yes, and now it's integrated into incident response training all over the place.
Right on, right on. Okay. So I heard that there's a SANS course for that coming up soon, Mick. You're doing something?
I'll be teaching it here in Columbus, Ohio, though, in the third week of August.
Okay. Well, I mean, before we move on to the thing that I got to talk about, are there any closing arguments or comments or questions or concerns or things you'd like to mention about incident response that people might find interesting?
There's something that is, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, which is the communications aspect. Mm-hmm. And when you get into a situation like this, you have to learn to control the panic.
That's a great way of putting it.
Mick knows exactly what I'm talking about. He's probably walked into places where people are running around with their hair on fire. And that's after the fire extinguishers have come out. Learning to control the panic is an essential skill, and it involves learning how to talk to different levels of people. And there was something that I did recently, just sort of a curiosity thing. For those who are familiar with XKCD, there was a particular XKCD that I'm actually looking it up right now. 1133, the Upgoer 5. It was an explanation of the Saturn V rocket using only the top 1,000 words in the English language. And I say it that way because that's exactly the way it was described, because the word 1,000 is not in the top 1,000 most common words in the English language.
Okay.
So I started thinking, can I describe my job as a penetration tester using only the top 1,000 words? And there's a couple of sites out there that'll help you to do this. It took me close to 3 hours to get into a description that I was reasonably satisfied with, because there are a huge number of words that are not really allowed. Computers in there. I don't have the exact text in front of me, and like I said, I spent a lot of time editing it. So I think network is in there, maybe. But there's a lot of things that are not in there. And so it's really challenging. Now, the reason for this is not so that you can go and describe your job or the situation to a CEO the way that you would to a child. It's so that you have a starting point that you can use to explain what's going on to anybody. If you can explain what you do to a child who only knows 1,000 or so words, you can start substituting words, bring the language level up a little bit, and start working with teenagers, start working with people who are new to the workplace, start working with executives who don't have technical knowledge of what's going on. The more practice you get, the easier it is to control the panic, because you can put things in using phrasing that other people are going to understand no matter what their overall level is. Also, one of the things that is really important to do, I shouldn't say important, it's a strong option, is to find somebody who has a really pleasant voice. And I got to say, Mick, you have a very, very pleasant voice. I would love to have your voice on the phone when somebody's in a panic.
I'll be straight honest. That's one of the things that I use as a weapon, as a tool when I'm doing these sorts of things, because I can't overstate how on the money you are about controlling the panic, because I've seen very intelligent people and very smart organizations do powerfully stupid things. I've seen one organization that actually is affiliated with the legal profession destroy evidence deliberately.
We've been hacked. Reformat the system.
Exactly. And so you have people do really dumb things because when you're panicked, all reason flees your brain. And so what you need to do, probably the toughest job it is to master in doing incident response, is how to be cool, how to be that calm island in the middle of the storm. You know, I made an allusion to when CEOs like flip chairs. I actually was in a room once when somebody did that. And all I did was I kind of sat there while the rest of the room's horrified and they're kind of like running away. I just kind of looked at my watch and I said, okay, now that you have that out of your system, can we resume? Because the bad guys are still in the network despite your temper tantrum. And all of a sudden, the room just, I had full control over that, and I used that moment as, all right, here's the tasks that need done. We've already discussed this. Let's execute. Go. And that you have to be so cool, so calm, and it's tough because there's going to be times where somebody looks you dead in the eye and says, yeah, we couldn't patch or segment our network ever because it was like hard. And you're like, really? Because like you have a job to do, but you can't say that, you know. And it's tough. And sometimes, you know, there are good reasons why they can't do that thing. You know, you've not been in their shoes. They've probably wanted to patch the network and segment things up, but they can't for whatever reason. So try to have empathy. One of the things that I'll leave folks with is the three keys to winning these things are people, process, technology, in that order. Earlier in my career, I would have got that exactly opposite, and I would have tried to tech my way out of the problem. Incident response is never, ever a technology problem. It's always a people problem. Whether it's an external people or an internal people doing something, it's always a people problem. Start treating it like that, and you'll win.
If you want to, one of the things that I've tried to kind of nail home when I've been talking about incident response, when I've been teaching 504, and just when I'm talking to people in general, if you want to see the best way to respond to an incident, think about how you've seen firefighters roll up to a building that's on fire. They get out, they move with purpose, quickly. They do not run. They are not screaming gibberish at each other. They have a specific purpose. They are going about it in a very focused way, but they are doing so in a way that conserves their energy, that keeps the end goal in mind, and it is looking to address the both the immediate and the long-term problems, depending on what the situation is. They will alter their priorities as things go along. But again, you never see them running. You never see them panicked, and there's a very, very good reason for that.
That's awesome. That's a really good takeaway. I was thinking more like you were Mick. You were mentioning the being in the conference room in the story. It's almost like you have to be almost like a doctor and have some kind of professional distance where you're like, that's great, and I understand your concerns, but you have to. You're the voice of reason in the room, and you have to be that sometimes.
Yeah, it is. But, I'll tell you what, it's actually really cool. The thing that I always approach them, and it's much easier as a consultant to do this than if it's your own organization. But as a consultant, I have the luxury of approaching this as a really cool and complex puzzle. And I'm here to tell the story. What happened when? How did the interactions take place? And so when you keep that in mind, it's much better to kind of keep that firefighter pose, for lack of a better thing, and I'm totally stealing that, Jarrod.
Yeah. Well, when on Star Trek, when the crisis is happening, they don't run down the corridors. They're always walking too. And I was like, why aren't you people running to engineering? There's a crisis. And so I totally get that.
Go to one end of your building, have somebody open up all the doors, and run all the way to the other side of the building. Now, sit down and start your incident response. See how well you do.
Well, yeah, you're out of breath. You're sweating. It's already a tense situation, and you've just turned up the heat in your body, so now you're uncomfortable. I get that. I totally understand. Totally understand. That's awesome, gentlemen. I wish Mr. Betcher was here, because we talk about this kind of stuff, and it's like it's folks like you who are in the industry who understand these things. It just makes the podcast that much easier. It's fantastic. So I'm going to leave the incident response and digital forensics talk at that, because I would really love to have you guys come back another time to discuss, various facets of these kinds of things. So it's just great. So for our next little bit, when the tickets for DerbyCon, they had about 100 of them go on sale because of they were testing the system. So I have never been to DerbyCon. This will be my first quote unquote real con. I went to B-Side Seattle last year, but I wanted to go to a con. I didn't want to go to Black Hat and DEF CON because it just seems to be too big. And I keep hearing that DerbyCon, because Mr. Betcher went to Derby last year, bastard. He took his wife, not me. I don't know how that works.
But you're not bitter about it.
I am not bitter that he took his wife. Anyway. So I wanted to go to DerbyCon this year, and I told Mr. Betcher we were going to get tickets. And the minute those went on sale, I got 2 tickets. And then I was like, you know what? I want to get 2 more tickets. So I bought 4 tickets total. And me and Mr. Betcher are both going. Of course, I have his ticket. I'm going to hold over his head for a few days. But I have 2 tickets that a listener, we're going to give away 1 now, and we're going to give away 1 next week. And before the podcast, me and Mr. Betcher had thought about it for a while, and we were like, oh yeah, we'll do something cool, to capture the flag where people got to figure out clues and stuff. And we're just not smart enough for that kind of thing. So I asked Mr. Douglas and Mr. Jarrod Frates here about how we could go about doing this. And he actually, it was Mick and Jarrod actually thought of it together. We are going to give away 1 ticket to somebody who will send me, we're going to have a drawing, and to enter the drawing, you must give a donation to the iHack charities. So if you are wanting to go to DerbyCon, and this is a free ticket, I will not pay for your airfare. I will not pay for your lodgings. You must find a hotel room yourself or bed down with one of the people who are sharing a room with 5 other people. We will give you the ticket at DerbyCon. You must be at DerbyCon. I'm not going to email it to you because I do not want you to scalp it. I have trust issues. Sue me.
You're in the right industry for that, my friend.
Yeah. So from what I understand, and what from Mick and Jarrod were telling me, you go up the escalator, and the registration table is usually at the top of the escalator. So I will give you contact information for myself and Mr. Betcher. You will contact us. We will meet you at the registration table. We'll shake hands. We'll want to interview you, obviously, the two people who get the tickets. It won't be one person getting two tickets. So you donate to Hackers for Charity. Send me the receipt showing that you actually donated to bds.podcast@gmail.com. I will put those into a random number generator, and whoever gets that will win. So you can donate $100 or you can donate $5. Everybody's going to. Actually, I would prefer you give more than $5 because don't be a dick. Hackers for Charity is a great organization. So. Yeah, donate, send me the receipt to bds.podcast@gmail.com, and we will draw the first one on July 31st at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll do the second one a week later. So it'll be July the 8th, I guess, or August the 8th. So July 31st and August 8th. That's when we will draw for both tickets. Is there anything else I'm forgetting?
You're going to be using an online service that uses a true random number generator that uses hardware based from quantum mechanics.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we'll do that. Random.org. Okay.
Yeah, none of this pseudo random stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's got quantum computers and qubits and stuff involved, so it's big important thing. The only other stipulation is we want to interview you on the podcast, so come with something interesting you want to talk about or rant about, as long as it's not down with DerbyCon or whatever, being a dick. Just come on. We'll ask you how you're doing about the pod, at DerbyCon, if it's your first time, that kind of stuff. And we're interested because it's going to be my first DerbyCon. I've never been. I've heard nothing but awesome things about it, and Mr. Betcher will be at his second one, so he can shove off. But so yeah, that's it. So as soon as this post, which will probably be 25 July, as soon as you hear it, once you give a donation to Hackers for Charity and email me the receipt saying that you actually, in fact, did, I will put your name into the drawing. It will be drawn on the 31st for the first ticket and August 8th for the second ticket. And good luck, everybody. So that's that for that. The one thing we want to do before we go, though, Jarrod, is you're the CTO, right?
That's correct. Chief Technology Officer.
Easy there. So I don't know if you've never listened to the podcast. A couple of weeks ago, we had one of the co-founders, Roxy, on to discuss projects she's working on. And we've had actually Jarrod and Roxy and Sean
and Richard.
Sean and Richard, we had them on a podcast talking about hackerspaces about 2 months ago. And we wanted to find out about an update to the Dallas-based hackers, TheLab.ms, I think, Jarrod is, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so what do you got any updates for us?
Yeah, we have acquired our physical space. We have been a sort of virtual organization without a fixed home. We've been relying on the generosity of various locations to provide a little bit of space for us. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that has, despite the generosity, it has sometimes meant competing with background noise and patrons of the establishment and so forth. But we now have a physical location located in Plano, Texas, and we are in the process of kind of sprucing it up. We have it's kind of an interesting thing watching this unfold, because I've never been part of setting up a commercial space before. So things like setting up power, making sure that the air conditioning works, sort of an important thing in Texas. Figuring out how the internet stuff is going to be working, going in and running new cabling. The place has phone jacks throughout, and I was kind of hoping that maybe it had been run with Cat 5. Unfortunately, it was run with Cat 3. So unless we're going to do 10 megabit, which doesn't go over very well these days. So we're really, in many ways, starting from scratch. At this point, we have a fair amount of technology that has been donated. We are still looking for more. So if you have some technology that you can offer up, servers, workstations, notebooks, things like that. We are also looking for a number of more mundane things. Folding tables, chairs for our classrooms, monitors, projector for the classroom, screens, whiteboards, literally down to pens, markers, and stuff like that. If you have spares, we are certainly willing. We can't guarantee we're going to take everything. It's going to depend on what we actually need at the exact time of the donation. And it's also going to depend to an extent on quality. We want things to look nice. But please get in touch with us. Also, we might be able to use some services. So as we're sort of sprucing things up, and ultimately, if you don't have services that you can offer up, if you don't have things that you can donate, you can always donate time. We've had a number of volunteers who have been in, who have helped out with painting the location. We still have cabling that is going to be done. We have probably some. Probably not the electrical. That we're going to let professionals handle the electrical stuff. But for things, we're going to be setting up an AV room where we can actually record audio and possibly eventually video. So if you have some knowledge on how to set that up, we'd love to be able to talk to you. So it's an exciting time. Also, I want to mention that TheLab.ms is it's a not-for-profit. We survive on the generosity of our members primarily at this point. And we still have the option for lifetime memberships through the end of this year. And that is $1,000. It's currently the equivalent of 5 years of membership, but you will never have to pay membership dues again after that. You'll get the full benefits as we go on. But again, only through the end of this year.
So that's awesome. I'm glad you guys are getting down to it where you're starting to move in. You ever thought about like an Amazon wish list or something that might help you out if you wanted to have people buy things and just donate them that way?
I don't know if anybody's looked into an Amazon wish list. That's actually an excellent idea. I will throw that at the leadership. There are a number of things that we've been looking into. One of the things we've really been kind of shocked at as we've been going through is the number of programs that are available, and some of them are sort of throwing nickels into the pot. Things like shopper programs. I think we are now signed up through Kroger and through Tom Thumb. We're also part of Amazon Smile, so. We have the link on our website at TheLab.ms for Amazon, and I think also for the Kroger and Tom Thumb. But we are still looking around at other opportunities. There's a startling amount of support out there for nonprofits, and we're still kind of getting our minds wrapped around what's available.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's great to hear about the hackerspace. I'm glad it's going so well for you. Mick, I wanted to find out if you've done, did you do anything for DerbyCon? Have you submitted a paper for DerbyCon? Will we be able to see you over there?
Well, I submitted a talk. I will be at DerbyCon.
Yay!
Because Adam Crompton and I are going to be doing a training class. One of the 2-day classes is pen testing with PowerShell, and so we've got some really cool stuff. There's going to be all kinds of good cheat sheets, and this will be the first time that Adam and I have run this class, so we're real excited to get it and see how it goes.
Is that sold out?
Cheating way to get in.
It's stolen. It's sold out. The training is closed.
Okay.
And it's going to be a small class, and I'm actually kind of happy for that, so that I hope it doesn't go off the rails, but if it does, we'll be able to, contain it a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay, that's very cool. So I know that DerbyCon was sold out, but the only other way to get into DerbyCon was actually to buy seats into a training, and I assume all those trainings that they've got there are pretty much sold out at this point.
They are all sold out at this point. That's my understanding.
we're going to be a pretty hot ticket. We're going to be a pretty hot item. We're on 2 tickets here to DerbyCon. So that's awesome. So we've got more than enough time here. We usually try to, if you've never listened, we try to educate people. Like I said, we try not to do the news of the week thing because a lot of podcasts already do that. One of our sponsors that we have is Cybrary.it. Actually, they're the only sponsor, which was kind of cool because we sponsored them to get their forum and a lot of their infrastructure built out. And then turned around and they said, hey, we'd like to sponsor you. So we actually sponsor them and they sponsor us. We have an official forum at Cybrary.it. If anybody wanted to get a hold of both of you gentlemen, how would they go about doing that on the Twitters and the LinkedIns and the Face Spaces?
Hit me up on Twitter. This is Mick. I'm Better Safety Net.
Better Safety Net. All right.
You have a much better name than I do. Mine is just at Jarrod Frates.
Well,
I tried to go with the name that I switched to a few years ago, Network Llama, but it was picked up by somebody in like 2008 that like posted twice and hasn't touched their account since.
Oh, dang it. Well, I'm no better. I'm at Brian Brake on Twitter.
Yeah, but you have kind of a cool name.
Well,
mine's hard. Hey, look, at the very least, yours is easy to spell.
Really? It's got a Bryan, and I still have people on LinkedIn telling me I spelled my podcast name wrong.
Well, that's their problem. It's their problem if they can't see the joke.
I know. That's cool.
I shouldn't say joke. It's not joke. If they can't see the clever twist on it.
Yeah, exactly. You can find Mr. Betcher, my co-host, who's sadly not here this week. He would have loved to have done this one, at Betcher Pwned. That's BOETTCHERPWNED. The official Twitter is at Brakesec, BRAKE Sec. We're on Facebook. We have a LinkedIn group. I think it's got like 12 people. We have a Tumblr. We've got a Google blog. We're all over the place.
Not on Ello. Well, you are technically on Ello, but
we are on Ello. Yeah, I don't do much on there because it's like nobody's really on there. We have Google Plus, But, we try to educate. That's why we are on every week. We've been around for almost a year and a half now. We've done a podcast every week. We've never taken a break. We try not to. We don't want to. We try to appeal to a vast variety of people. We've had Phil Coggin on to talk about network security. That'll scare you, your hair white just listening to him talk about how easy it is to hijack BGP. We've had people from I2P on a couple of months ago. We had Strahd and Ampernand on to discuss I2P and Tor and anonymizing networks. I'd like to have them back on because I read something about Hornet, which is a high-speed anonymizing network. I'd like to have them or somebody else from that group on because they were awesome. We have DFIR. We've had Mick on a couple times talking about PowerShell. We've had hacker spaces. We try to get as esoteric as possible. I'd like to get on to some healthcare stuff because healthcare is big with the breaches. So, bds.podcast@gmail.com. If you have suggestions or comments or anything you'd like to discuss, please let us know. We do take the feedback and we do run with that. We're on iTunes. If you like what you've heard, please leave a review. So if this is the first time you've ever listened, this has been Breaking Down Security. Thank you for listening, even if it's only for the ticket. We hope that you'll be inspired to listen to some other podcasts. So, gentlemen, you are always welcome to come back on. There's no reason that we would never, ever have you back on if you want to come on and rant or talk about something. You are some fantastic guest for my earballs. I love hearing you folks. So please come back when you can.
Will do.
All right. That's been it for Breaking Down Security. Mr. Betcher, we'll be back at full strength next week, Mr. Betcher, and hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.